to mind? Terms? A little louder? Dhyana. Dhyana is one. And from dhyana, we get derivatives, transcriptions, phonetic transcriptions that you all know. What do you do when you go to the city 10,000 Buddhas for a meditation retreat? It's called suffering. No. What's it called? Chan. And Chan comes from the Chinese chana, which is a phonetic transcription of dhyana. And so with the Japanese, Zen, right. So we got quite a few here. We got shamatha vipassana. And sometimes it's interchangeable with dhyana, Jhana. And that is describing, well, that would be a couple talks in itself, but bhavana is sometimes used, and satipatthana, which is also a form of using the shamatha vipassana method and so forth. So there's a lot of terms. The one that Han Shan is using, because he's coming out of the Chinese tradition, is dhyana or chan. And sometimes in the text they actually use, they'll say dhyana or they'll say chan, that he's using. And generally, although they all have different names and they vary by geography and by time, and probably even more importantly by culture, and then at a deeper level I would say they vary because of the differing personality types and psychological dispositions that people have across time and across distance. And so all of these practices that we group under the term meditation seem to be very different, but in fact they have a very common foundation. Basically, philosophically, they all go back to what would we say would be the core teachings? Oops. Real simple. This is beginning Buddhism. Huh? Well, that will come out of this, but where does samadhi come from? Well, no, let me put it a different way. Samadhi is part of a package, right? The samadhi package, which you can order online, by the way, at a very reasonable price. Comes from a package of what? What's usually packed together in samadhi as a method, as an approach? Well, samadhi's concentration is a translation maybe of samadhi. Okay, so yeah, so you have shila, samadhi, and then prajna. So these three are kind of the method of training that all of them rely on. So all the various forms of meditation, what have we called just now, are all going back to using this same method, shila, samadhi, prajna. We'll translate it as. Shila is sort of like virtue or moral discernment, moral training. And then the samadhi is various forms of the concentration, focused mindfulness, calming the mind, and leading to, when combined, prajna, or profound and deep insight into the nature of things. So these three, shila, samadhi, prajna, and they all come out of basically the fourfold, or the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. This is the core of the Buddhist teaching, and all of these traditions basically share this. So, in a sense, the Eightfold Path, which the Buddha gave to all of his disciples and kind of goes across all traditions, was essentially Four Noble Truths based on his experience of cultivation in his lifetime, where he came to a realization of the first truth is called dukkha. It's translated as angst, or suffering, or anxiety, stress, dissatisfaction, unsatisfactoriness. And this was real universal and real existential. It wasn't because at India at that time there was a profound amount of poverty or suffering or anything. Rather, he's describing an incredible psychological condition, basically coming from an observation that we all have, that the flow of things in our lives just sort of move on without stopping. There's this endless shifting and transient and permanent quality to stuff, what we call anita, anitya or anicca. But moreover, it had to do with the human condition, that we're born, we mature in age, sickness and infirmity set in, and finally, inexorably, it ends in death. And this observation, this kind of sense of things, not only things, but oneself in this, produced for the Buddha this stress, this anxiety, this unsatisfactoriness. He called it a burning oppressiveness, is one of the translations. It's from the Fire Sermon. And he gave a teaching where he basically described that everything was on fire with this flux and change. And the effect on it was a kind of oppressiveness, which might be another translation of dukkha. In any event, what he did was began then a investigation of how to work with this problem, how to solve this problem, instead of just giving into it or coming to the conclusion that there wasn't any meaning or purpose. And his discovery on his awakening, he then put into these four truths. He went into what the cause of this angst was. And he went into the third truth, which was that it could be ended. And the fourth truth was the way to do it. And the way to do it is what meditation's about. So meditation comes out of this methodology, and he called this the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, basically, if we wanted to reduce it down to Shila Samadhi Prajna. So that's a nutshell. Okay, and this is what Han Shan's kind of inheriting and passing on to us. Now, what Han Shan's doing is he's providing both the theory and the practice, because part of the method the Buddha developed, and this is probably why a lot of people have trouble sometimes maybe thinking that Buddhism's a religion. And it's really not so much a religion as this transformative method or teaching. Because the Buddha didn't say and didn't propose that he was a god, or any Buddha was a god or a creator. Nor did he propose that there was any way that you would be saved, because essentially he never posited there was an essential soul to save. So, you don't have a soul, you don't have a savior, you don't have a God creator. And then finally, the highest state, what they called nirvana, was just the release from suffering. It was an incredible state of joy and liberation, release from suffering, so it wasn't even a heaven. So this teaching then becomes more of a transformative teaching. And what the Buddha did when his first disciples, he just said, this teaching was called the turning of the wheel, the turning of the Dharma, where he gave the four truths. And instead of telling his disciples necessarily to believe in him, he told them to believe in themselves, to believe in this intrinsic nature that they had that could, in fact, lead to the same realization that he had. And he posited that this was universal in all of us, all of them, all living beings. And so instead of, all he could do at that point was to say, okay, you too can do what I just did. And I'm just giving you the method to do it. It's a real different approach than saying, believe in me, follow me, I'm the truth, and so forth. He's just saying, I just had this incredible awakening experience and profound liberation. And in part of that realization, I realized that this was not unique to me or special to Brahmins or different caste or class or genders or anything. It was universal. And then he turned the wheel 3 times, it said. There was 3 turnings. So I'm giving you some technical stuff tonight that you may or may not find interesting, but it kind of gives a framework for this. The first turning is him saying, indicating, I did this. This is what I did. He describes what he did, and he said, I had this experience. The second turning is encouragement or exhortation, which he says, hey, try it. You need to try this for yourself. I did it. It's wonderful. It's inconceivable. But it's no good unless you do it. So this is very kind of pragmatic. He's simply saying, even if you see some changes in me, and if you understand I might have gone through something, it's nothing unless you do it. So he exhorted them to undertake this. And then the third turning, which is the most interesting, is called confirming or evidential. In other words, you yourself will know the flavor of this. You yourself will confirm this experiment through your own direct realization. And you've done it then. So the three turnings in some ways are even more important than the four truths, because the methodology, if the four truths sort of leaves you hanging, well, what do I do with those four truths? And even if you say, well, you practice or you cultivate, the moving through those three from what they call indicative, indicating, to the exhorting, to the evidential, gives you a methodology you can then apply. And so what Han Shan is doing here, he's simply laying down that methodology for us, or for this person he's responding to then, and saying, I'm giving you the same method that was given to me, that was given to the disciples of the Buddha, and it's been handed down generation after generation. This is an experiment in human consciousness. This is what you do with your humanity. You cultivate it in this way, and you can replicate the enlightenment experience of the Buddha. That's the goal. So, really simple. Those of you, sometimes this is called, the first one's called pariyati, which means it's the learning that you do from studying with a teacher. And then the next one is you apply this, you put these teachings into practice. It's called patipati. Patipati. I don't know if my pronunciation is very good. Patipati. Sounds like an Indian food, but it means you actually practice this. And the third one is called pativida, which means you actually then have the realization. So these are the three words that are used for that. But meditation is under the patipati, the practice. So meditation combined with the moral grounding of yourself gradually puts you into a position of training where your mind can calm, you can see things more clearly, you can see the mechanisms of emotions and karma and whatnot that are driving your lives, and gradually get a handle on this, disentangle yourself from the habitualness, which is what Han Shan has been talking about, and confusion, and directly realize the state called awakening or Buddha. So one other thing I want to say, and some people disagree with me on this, it's been the story of my life since I was born. Well, it's probably because I had three sisters, and their job was to disagree with me on everything. So I've gotten training with disagreements, not so much by patience. Although I would say questionably Buddhism is a religion, I don't think it's useful to use that term. I think it's more useful to call it transformative teaching aiming at human liberation. And I will also say it's not mysticism. See, that's the other thing that happens when people think of meditation. They think, it's mysticism. But there's a little problem with mysticism and Buddhist meditation. Anybody get a feel for this? Those of you who looked into mysticism? Everybody know what mysticism is? Ever heard of it? Okay, you're nodding, Sarah. What is mysticism? It's different than, mystified is a sort of state of bewildered joy or confusion. Mysticism? Well, you should look into this. There's a whole rich tradition in the West of mystics, Christian mystics, contemplatives. Now it's ringing a bell, right? What do mystics do? They what? Sever? Discover it for themselves. It's a direct approach to spiritual realization. And usually mystics, very interestingly, pull themselves away from society, withdraw from society, sometimes go into deserts or mountain areas, and live in solitude alone. And they do rigorous ascetic practices too, of renunciation of the flesh. So they do austerities, they live simply, they wear ragged clothes. Sometimes St. Francis is considered a mystic, St. John of the Cross. There's a lot in the Catholic Christian tradition and across traditions. And then through these exercises, through these austerities, through renunciation and so on and so forth, they enter deeper and deeper states of transcendental awareness, for want of a better word, mystical states. Huh? Yeah. So the goal, of course, you jump to the chase here. The goal, no, that's it. What's the goal? The goal is to have union with the divine. And sometimes they talk about it as marriage. They marry with God. Male and female use this language of this. They empty themselves out so as to become one with the divine. And so then their mystical union is celebrated sometimes in their writing, sometimes in their drawings, which are pretty far out if you want to see mystical drawings about what this is. And sometimes in their poetry, and sometimes in their silence. They don't say anything. It's just like beyond words. And Buddhist meditation is not mysticism for a couple of reasons. One, it's more of a methodology than a mystical release or a mystical abandon, because part of what the mystic does is to abandon him or herself to this energy. But Buddhism says you use this energy in a methodological way to attain a penetration. If you abandon yourself to it, which is what Han Shan's talking about here as the warning against Buddhist meditation, do not abandon yourself to all these states and feelings, because you'll get lost. You may become mystical, but you won't get awakened. And the difference is, in Buddhism, what the Buddha said when he had his awakening, he said, everything I needed for this full awakening is whole and complete within me, lacking nothing. This nature of mine, this nature of all living beings is whole and complete, has everything needed. There's nothing, and again, let me say, there's nothing to seek outside. There's nothing to seek outside because you have it whole and complete. You've just covered over. You've entangled it, you've tied in knots, and all you have to do is disentangle it. So rather than having mystical union with something above and beyond or outside yourself, what you're doing is actually just activating I won't use the divine, you're activating the Buddha that is inherent within. You're actually just uncovering that as opposed to uniting with something outside. Yes. Your name? Marco? Yeah, sure. It's a good question. Is it related to what I just said or not? I'm not sure. Oh, they are lacking. Is that what you mean? Right. So if you go back, what that wholeness is, if you use a sort of term that it's whole and complete as we come into this life, does it get damaged? Does it get distorted? Does it get hit upon? And Mencius uses this term. He says, just like axes and foresters come to a wonderful forest and start cutting down the trees and take the trees away. And yet, with nurturing and water and the sun, the trees and things can come back. And he uses this metaphor to describe that human nature is whole and complete. However, it can be neglected from within, not paying attention to ourselves and cultivating that, or it can be harmed or bruised or even damaged from without. But it doesn't become less. It doesn't mean it's lacking. It just means that it's just as you put your hand in the stove and you pull back, you're no longer free and open in that way. So too, if you have a relationship or an encounter with, say, abusive parents, then this pulls back. But it doesn't become less and it doesn't go away. But the process of opening it up again to its fullness may take longer, may take some effort. But it is there. The resilience is there. And that's why even, in the Buddha's life, even when he encounters a serial killer, Angulimala, he doesn't dismiss Angulimala as incapable of this. He only says, you have smothered and buried and withered the seeds of your compassion, but they aren't gone. And although they're manifestly different than, say, the arhats around you, inherently, potentially, they're absolutely the same. So if you can change your mind and heart and cultivate, this fullness will, by itself, return. So that's the imagery to think. I hope that helps. Right. And so what the Buddha and Han Shan are saying here now is this is whole and complete, lacking nothing. So don't seek outside, because when you seek outside, you actually can't get anything, because everything outside is also conditioned and passing. Moreover, you neglect the jewel within, which is the one that needs to be nurtured and cultivated. Now to go back to your question, because what Han Shan will be talking about here is when we begin the process of the meditation practice, the ease or the difficulty, the joy or the obstructions that we meet are a manifestation of what we've done with that inherent nature. Have we cultivated? Have we let it be whole and full? Have we sort of nurtured it with virtue, or have we let it go wild? Ming uses a poem, The Return. He says, I'm going home. I'm returning to this natural home. My fields and gardens are choked with weeds. He's referring to letting this nature be neglected. How have we neglected it in our relationships, in our friendships, in our actions with body, mouth, and mind? And the Buddha is very specific: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, intoxicating mind and body, so that the natural wholeness is distorted, it's off, it's choked with weeds. He said, but why should I not return? I can make amends, I can recultivate, and so on and so forth. So this is the tone here. So what Han Shan's telling you about when we begin the practice of cultivation, these obstacles, memories, the seeds from all this past karma will naturally start to rise even more intensely than if we weren't being aware and trying to move in this direction called the return. And he said, at that point, just be patient. You simply need to be patient. Don't get turned. When good states come, don't think, I'm enlightened, I'm a Buddha. And when the negative states come, don't be disappointed and dejected and think it's hopeless, I can't do it. He says, simply remain solid, have an equanimity, and gradually these things will burn away and you move on. Okay? So, if we could go to tonight's text and move into where he's going. Well, what Han Shan is talking about now is he's laying down some of the theory that's important for the meditation state. Last passage we talked about last semester, we finished up, and he said, sometimes when you begin this practice, obstacles arrive, and you feel it's hard, it's really difficult to go forward. How many people meditate every day here? How many people would like to but don't? Okay. You are Han Shan people. So what Han Shan's talking to here, he's saying, you're the ones I'm talking to. It's like 1 day hot, 3 days cold, 2 days hot, 4 days cold. Why can't I make any progress? And the masters used to say it's like taking wood and making fire. You know, you rub the sticks, oh, it's not working. And you rub it again, it's just about to get warm. Oh, you stop. So you just keep this, you never get a fire going. So if you don't get a fire going, you can't get the light. If you can't get the light, you can't see the nature. If you can't see the nature, you're just wandering around in the dark. So the idea here is to keep the energy going. But he says when you make this effort, because of the karma in the past that you've created, letting your mind go to seed, in a sense, now it's difficult. The muscles are resisting. Just as the same as you've, overeaten and allowed yourself to get overweight and you think, I'm going to the gym. Well, you don't come home 20 pounds lighter on the first day or even the first week unless you're at a gym that's really not good for you. It takes a while. And usually after, you're 2 weeks in there and you lose a pound and you go, oh, God, I can't do this. It's hopeless. I thought I'd be down to 20. And you hurt. It hurts, and the muscles and the tendons and ligaments hurt, and it's sort of like, but if you stay with it, you build up a kind of kung fu, and it starts to happen. But if you go back and forth. Now, the worse shape you got yourself in, the harder it is to do this. Don't be like my niece, who decided she had become a couch potato and she was going to shape up, and so she got the nice running shoes and everything and decided to do a 26K without training. Yeah, you all laugh. You kind of know what that would involve, right? She almost killed herself. Now she's doing it gradually, and she's getting up to that state where she can do this more regularly. I said, just be like me. I do it every weekend. I can't even run through the rain. Any event, don't be discouraged when this happens. So what Han Shan was talking about, sometimes the obstacles we meet are sort of coarse and obvious, and that was our previous passage. He says, these you can get through. And there's actually 5. They're called the 5 nivarana, meaning the obstacles or impediments. One is just kind of craving, a sensual craving that's almost like addiction. The other is hatred or animosity or aversion. And that can manifest as just irritation. Just irritation all the time. Like you're always peed off at somebody or something, right? Never explodes. It's just this constant subsurface irritation, Maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. But that can go up to full outburst and loss of temper, to actually hatred and aggression, to violence, and then finally to killing. So it's a range, the second one of aversion or hatred. Then there's the one, they translate, it's always sloth and torpor, which sounds to me like 2 animals from, when I see the opossum crossing the world, you ever see a possum? That's what I always think of, because they're also called the sloth, aren't they? Sloth is like a monkey. It's not lazy? Oh, okay. So maybe I don't know where the words come from, but sloth and torpor sound very Anglo-Saxon. They sound like the, torpor. Torpor is what? Lethargic, sleepy, but it's not just after a big meal, it's all the time. Like getting up in the morning, you keep hitting the alarm and going back under, and then you kind of go to work and you're dazing through, and it's just like nodding out all the time, and have no ambition, no drive, no energy. So sloth and torpor is a karmic impediment. Interesting. That's the third one. The fourth one is restlessness and anxiety, hyper. And the fifth one is very interesting, a paralyzing skepticism. Now this translates as doubt, but it's not doubt. It's a paralyzing negative skepticism that says, I don't believe in anything. Nothing's possible. Everything is empty and false, and it's a nihilistic view. So you never actually try anything because you preempt it with the skepticism that says, what's the point? Everything's meaningless and whatnot, okay? As opposed to constructive doubt. What's constructive doubt? That's doubting others. No, and good doubt, and confidence is having faith in yourself. No, well, but it's constructive doubt. So there can be negative skepticism and positive skepticism. So constructive doubt would be, well, rigorous thinking, that's not too bad. Yeah, and looking into things deeply. Requiring verification. In other words, I will take something hypothetically, but I'm not going to just take it on your word or somebody else's word or on tradition or on faith or on the group says or my family or my culture always says it this way. Why do you burn paper money? Well, it's part of the thing around death. Well, why do you do it? Well, we've always done it that way. Oh, that's not skeptical, right? So there's a lot of Chinese New Year's things that happen. I ask my Chinese friends, why do you do that? Huh? Well, why do you do that? I don't know, something with ghosts or spirits or... right? It's a kind of non-skeptical. Well, we always done it that way. That's the worst form of sort of naivete. Anyhow, constructive skepticism, and Juri, Dharma Master Juri talks about this. This is when you doubt your own thoughts and emotions and feelings. You doubt your own perceptions. You say, who is this that's coming to these convictions and whatnot? So that's where the expression of the Chansko comes. Small doubt, small awakening. Big doubt, big awakening. No doubt, no awakening. So this is the doubt that is a cultivated doubt, looking into the sureness that you have that there's a me and a mine and so on and so forth. You're actually breaking down that. The end of that doubt is awakening. Okay, so now what he's talking about tonight, if we go to the passage, are we at however? Let's just go back to however. Okay, so before this he was talking about these five. He says, we've gotten rid of them. However, we've got what he calls wrong views here. And they permeate or pollute or cloud our wisdom. And they generate many kinds of fanciful, illusory, frivolous, we've gotten away from clever and fancy, we're moving towards frivolous, notions that shroud the mind. And then what happens is we take this as a wondrous and profound state. We get absorbed and we can't let go. So what he's talking about in what preceded was people start to meditate, and maybe they get beyond these five things, but then they want to have some enlightened state. They're seeking for an awakened state with some marks and signs, which might be, anybody? Share your enlightened states? Or what you thought might have been, or what you've seen others fall into. Levitation, or wanting to levitate. Now, I've seen people doing this, bouncing. In fact, when I was a monk and I went to Malaysia, going through customs, I was coming customs and opened my passport. Big shoe. Can you levitate? I thought, if I say yes, will I get in the country? If I say no, will I? This is a customs officer asking me if I could levitate. I said yes. He said, really? I said, yes. I just was levitating at 30,000 feet. Oh, stab, go on. The airplane. So levitation, blissed out states, constantly blissed. So you got this Cheshire cat smile on your face all the time. Psychic powers is the big one. Knowing others' thoughts, knowing the future, knowing past lives, making predictions, this kind of thing. All of these are called seeking states. Now what he says, this one is a particular view. It's not one of the five. This is another subtle level where you come to your meditation and instead of just disentangling and letting things go, you get a mind that wants to have something, which is again looking outside. You want to acquire something. It's shopping. Who was it, the Theravada monk we read? Who called it spiritual shopping, spiritual sightseeing. Yeah, Ajahn Mun, when he was in the forest meditating, he got off on this stuff because it was happening. He called it spiritual sightseeing. It was very exciting. He would sit in meditation, and all of a sudden his mind would be off into the heavens and hells and all over the place. So then we go on, he says, these frivolous notions, this particular, are simply projections of a shifting, agitated, or turbulent, we haven't figured out which one we like yet, unsettled consciousness. Vijnana. Vijnana, which is consciousness, which means jhana is the really profound seeing things as they are. This is sometimes called the real, true seeing, jhana. Vijnana means divided consciousness. So this is what he's talking about here. This is unsettled, divided, fragmented consciousness. And this, we're working on this, but we've come up with thicket and thorn. And we're not finished yet, are we, on this, Iwan? Have we decided thicket or thorn? Not yet. Well, some people prefer the thorn. They think that's pretty graphic, and but then we see other where it's thicket. So it's we decided it's British shrubbery. That Pooh Bear falls into. You know, he falls into a gorse bush. Huh? Well, thicket has a bunch of thorns. So, well, entanglement, but it means basically you have to think of Pooh, and we can't draw a Pooh. We drew a Pooh in our translation class. It was really, it shows Pooh. Remember, Pooh is, the trouble is, he says it comes from liking honey too much. Tersna, thirst, which is the first. And so he goes after honey, and then he falls out of the tree into a gorse bush, which is this tangled shrub with the thorns. And he turning around, and he got them all poked in his body and his butt, and he's really miserable. Dukkha, from Tersna. Okay? Okay, so Pooh is speaking Dharma here. So he says, this is also called the thicket of views, and it's a source of our discriminatory. Now, that's Chinese language. They translate it as discrimination. But discrimination, again, is referring to vijnana, divided consciousness. It doesn't mean discrimination in the sense of racial or ethnic discrimination, and it doesn't mean discerning, but it means dividing your awareness into so many ifs, buts, and ands that you can never make a decision. And so you're constantly doing cost-benefit analysis based on divided consciousness. Distorted scene. So a distorted scene is a really interesting, because vipassana, as you mentioned before, means pure, clear, direct seeing things as they are. Distorted scene, which might be translated as the Buddhist term for ignorance, instead of calling it ignorance, just saying misperception. Huh? Oh, now, could you explain what misperception was? Your MA thesis was about? Was it mean you were misperceiving it, or you were writing about it, or? Ah, and so misperception is a better translation of that what we call ignorance, because ignorance is a little judgmental. You know, a little. You're ignorant. Oh, well, thank you, doctor. No, if you're saying your vision's not correct, you know, and you need some glasses, you're misperceiving, I can take that. But ignorant is dismissive. It's like, okay, that's it. Huh? Yeah, you are or you aren't. There's no room to move here. So here, vijnana is discriminatory consciousness, and avidya, or this would be the distorted scene. I really like this. This is not the same, he says, as the coarse superficial we were talking about before, greed, hatred, and so forth. But this is something more. We are talking about, he says, a subtle, continuous ebb and flow, an arising and cessation. This is also called the obstruction of what is known. Now, the obstruction of what is known, it means you're obstructed by your ordinary knowledge, your ordinary consciousness. And instead of being a tool for liberation, it becomes, in fact, an impediment, ironically. So now you can see the meaning. Don't jump to the conclusion here that you shouldn't study. Okay, that's not what it's saying. What it's saying is there's certain study that can lead to cultivation, that can lead to liberation. There's other study that becomes an obstruction. That, for example, study that increases the kind of negative, skeptical, paralyzing doubt of nihilism. It can be something as simple as that, as your simple sort of flow of random ideas and thoughts that are just going nowhere, and at the end of the day, they didn't amount to anything, and in your dreams you do it, and you wake up and do it again, like dental floss. But it also can refer to, here he's talking about fundamental ideas, notions that you have, that you hold and think, I see things, I know this. And what he's talking about particularly is the one mentioned before. And one of the fundamental views of what is known as called grasping on results. In other words, seeking things from your meditation is one of the grasping views, it's called. So it's a category. So this is a technical list. We're not going to go through it all tonight because there's not time. But I'm just saying, when he says he's talking about these views, he's referring to a particular view. And some of the views are denying cause and effect. That's one view. And the other view is falling into either an eternalism or nihilism, that, oh, there's nothing whatsoever, everything's empty, or everything goes on eternally just as it is, including me. One of the views is called grasping at views, and this is referring to when you begin the spiritual practice, you start to grasp and attach and look for results. So this is the one he's referring to. This is called knowing. It's just this that obstructs correct knowing and seeing. If and when people mistake this diluted understanding for the truth, they can go mad. Because as you're progressing in your cultivation, you're sitting more, you're sitting longer, it's as if you're boiling water and then you're putting a pressure cooker lid on the top and not letting that steam go off and rise. And it creates a kind of madness because you start attaching to your views, you start seeking more. One of the things that happens, you're sitting, you have a nice state. Okay? So now, how many people are past the pain gate in their meditation? That means you can sit for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and there's no pain in your back and knees and elbows and ankles and so forth, and your eyes and your teeth. My teeth hurt, my tongue itches. It's nothing like that. Okay? Anybody? Okay. Anybody ever get through it just a little bit? Yeah. So you're sitting and going, wow, whoa. So this thing of grasping at views means I like that. I want that. I want to repeat that. So the next sit, you sit down. Come on, come on, come on, come on. And you start getting anxious and restless because you want to replicate that state. And that's what he means by going mad. And then what happens, you can't replicate it. And the reason you can't replicate it, first you start with, it's too noisy in here. Everybody's coughing. Why did I go to a meditation retreat when the flu was out? I wish they'd just shut up. If they didn't, I was ready there, and then somebody coughed. And now that person's clicking their tongue. Driving me nuts. What are some of the other things you experience when people talk to themselves? They breathe too heavy. So you're sitting meditation, you're about to get to that nirvanic, blissful liftoff stage. Or they fall asleep and they snore. Yeah. And so instead of entering samadhi, you're going, stop it, shut up. And you start fighting with everybody, and you think, it's because of them that I can't get back to bliss. So then you pull yourself out and you go to your own room, or you go in the mountains and you do it. And you're just about to enter meditation samadhi, and some fly comes in. So then you go to war with the fly. And and then you're starting to swat the fly and going around. And if your teacher walked into the point, you're going, what are you doing? You've gone mad. You're chasing a fly. What happened to your mind? Huh? But I want to get that state back. You see, it can lead, or it leads the other. You have a negative state and you slip into despair and you say, oh, I've caught a demon, I'm hopeless, blah, 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 I'm falling into the hells, my karma's too heavy, I can't do it, da, 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 da. So that's what he means by going mad. I could give you some graphic examples from my own experience in the years that we were studying with my teacher of people who, in pursuit of this meditation, spiritual shopping cart thing, actually went mad. Entered states that we would, like my grandmother would say, you're nuts. That kind of simple, just looking at somebody. But there's no time tonight, so maybe I'll save them for next week. We're out of time. I don't know, maybe you're not interested in this, and then that's that. Okay, so I'll share some of them next week. Some of them are pretty far out. The interesting thing about it is when you're taken with the state, you yourself think, I alone am sane. I alone am sober. Everybody else is just wacko. Leave me, and now they're giving me feedback because they're jealous. They're trying to obstruct my state. I'm not going to pay any attention to these betas. And so you start to get arrogance and hubris with it. Interestingly, it sort of mimics the Greek tragedy. You know, in the Greek tragedy, the hero has this, it's called hubris or hamartia. It's a character flaw. And he or she doesn't see it in themselves, and it gets bigger and bigger. And everybody else sees it, but they don't see it. And it's like they're walking towards a cliff. And they're saying, I alone am pure. I alone am sober. And they're looking up at the sky, and they don't see that they're about to step off a cliff. Because by then, they've gone mad with the character flaw. And then the tragedy occurs. Have you ever seen Greek tragedies or read them? So if you don't get that it's happening, every once in a while this little Greek chorus goes through. There's a little Greek chorus and they go through. He's mad, he's going to the cliff, he's going to fall. Oh, whoa. And you go, yes. But he doesn't hear the Greek chorus, the hero doesn't. Sort of like this sideline thing that goes through. So when you get into this state, often you want to do solitude. I want to go into seclusion. Because now you feel you're onto it, you're hot, you alone have it, everybody else is an obstruction and impediment. And if you only go into seclusion, you will penetrate very quickly. So most of the states that I'll maybe relate some next week had to do with Western disciples of my teacher, who, unlike you guys, were very laid back, not ambitious. No, they were super ambitious, super goal-driven, and felt as if, if the Buddha took 17 lifetimes or whatever, I could do it in 17 weeks. Someone said, I can do it in 17 days. So they would come in and they would do this marathon busting keister to get awakened in X amount of time, right? Well, with their body, with the mind going mad, the body sort of follows along. Mind and body are non-dual. So what they would do is, I want to enter seclusion. The master would say, no, don't go into seclusion. You're not ready for it. I'm ready. I've got all it takes. I can do it. I'm young, I'm strong, and I've got my mantra, and I want to get awakened. Life and death is a great matter. There's no time. So you're thinking of the white rabbit. I'm late for a very important date. No time to say hello, goodbye, I'm late. I got to enter nirvana. And the master says, no, don't do it. Yeah, I want to do it. What kind of teacher are you? You won't let me enter seclusion. Okay. Finally, go ahead. And within a short period of time, I would say in 99.9% of the cases that I can remember, mysticism, awakening did not occur, madness quickly came. In some cases, they knew they were mad. In other cases, they thought they had arrived. It was that kind of madness. So we'll stop here tonight. Next Thursday, our class, we have a small class that meets and works over the text, and we're going to keep moving on with the translation. But we'll continue next week with Han Shan. But I wanted to frame it a little bit with the background for meditation. You can kind of understand where Han Shan's going. Why is he spending time on this? And the reason he's spending time on this is because this is laboratory work, and he's giving the guidelines, he's giving the lab manual that you need to steer by in order to take this practice on successfully. Okay. No time for questions. If you have questions, thank you for yours. It was a good one. Save it for next week, and we'll pick it up here again. Announcements? No announcements. If you get time and you want to have a nice thought before you go to bed, go home and Google Winnie the Pooh and the gorse bush, and then you will see the thicket and thorns. Can you pull it up? Oh, that's another one. Yeah. Well, they're probably politically incorrect, so you're not going to have them anymore. You do have, okay.
Saturday night, this coming Sunday, Berkeley Buddhist Monastery will celebrate the Chinese New Year with a lot of food, with a lot of people in the media. Please come to
So this, tomorrow night,
Sunday.
this Sunday, the Oakland Museum is going to celebrate Chinese New Year.
Yeah, and we will be there.
Okay, and what are you going to do?
Vivian volunteer will prepare a very delicious spring roll.
Spring rolls.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
The free treat, and also the dragon dance group from the
dragon dance.
do the performance. And also, the Chinese orchestra from CCTV also will do the performance.
Wow.
Start at 12 p.m.
12 p.m. noon.
Noon.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, 12 to 4. Peaceful.
No burning paper money or anything.
So if you are adult, you need to pay $15. If you are a kid, $10.
How about a senior?
Senior, $10.
Okay. Okay, we're going to do the transference in English. May every living being our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san ba